The exclusive Skyline Club sat on the 50th floor of Manhattan's most prestigious building, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a glittering view of the city below. James Bennett sat at his usual corner table, swirling an expensive whiskey in his crystal glass. At 45, he had everything money could buy: a tech empire worth billions, multiple homes across the globe, and a fleet of luxury cars. Yet tonight, like most nights, he sat alone. His peaceful solitude was interrupted when Marcus Sterling, his longtime business rival, approached his table with a smug smile. Marcus had always competed with James, from their college days to their current status as tech moguls. While James built his fortune in innovative software, Marcus dominated the hardware market. Another lonely evening, Bennett. Marcus pulled up a chair without invitation. You know, for all your billions, you still haven't figured out what matters in life. James raised an eyebrow, already irritated by Marcus's presence. And what would that be, Sterling? A trophy wife like yours? Marcus laughed, signaling the waiter for another round. At least I have someone to go home to. When was your last relationship? 3 years ago. The whiskey had already lowered James's usual defenses. He leaned forward, his blue eyes flashing with challenge. I could have a family whenever I want. It's a choice to focus on my business. Really? Marcus's smile widened. Care to put your money where your mouth is? The club's soft jazz music played in the background as James considered the challenge. What did you have in mind? A bet. $5 million says you can't marry someone of my choosing within 30 days and make it work for a year. James scoffed. That's it. Easy money. Marcus held up his hand. Not so fast. I get to choose the bride, and you have to actually live together, appear in public as a couple, a whole deal. No fake marriage. Done. James didn't hesitate. $5 million was pocket change to him, and his pride wouldn't let him back down. The next morning, nursing a hangover in his penthouse office, James received an email from Marcus. Attached was a photo and basic information about Sarah Mitchell, a 35-year-old waitress at Joe's Diner in Brooklyn. She was a widow with 7 children and currently pregnant with her 8th child. James nearly spat out his coffee. He immediately called Marcus. This is a joke, right? He demanded. Marcus's laughter crackled through the phone. Scared already, Bennett? She works the morning shift. Better hurry if you want to meet your future wife. James slammed down his phone. He stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city below. He never backed down from a challenge, but this was insane. 7 kids? Pregnant? A waitress? 2 hours later, James found himself sitting in a worn-out booth at Joe's Diner. The place was nothing like his usual establishments: formica tables, sticky menus, and the smell of griddle grease in the air. He felt completely out of place in his $3,000 suit. Sarah Mitchell moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her pregnant belly visible under her blue uniform. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she smiled warmly at her customers. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore no makeup. Yet there was something striking about her, a quiet dignity in how she carried herself. James watched as she handled a crying child at one table with gentle patience, then firmly but kindly dealt with a complaining customer at another. Her 7 children, he'd learned, ranged from 15 years old to 3. Her husband had died 6 months ago in a construction accident, leaving her with minimal insurance and a mountain of bills. As she approached his table, James straightened his tie. He never had to pursue a woman who wasn't already interested in his wealth and status. This would require a different approach. Coffee, sir? Sarah asked, holding up a pot. Yes, please. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she poured. And maybe a few minutes of your time. I have a business proposition that could help with those bills I imagine you're struggling with. Sarah's hand stilled, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. I don't know what you've heard, sir, but I'm not interested in any propositions. It's not what you think, James said quickly. Please, just 5 minutes. It could change your life, and your children's lives. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her hand unconsciously moving to her pregnant belly. Finally, she nodded. My break's in 20 minutes. 5 minutes is all you get. As she walked away, James loosened his tie. For the first time in years, he felt nervous. This bet was either the biggest mistake of his life or the beginning of something he couldn't yet understand. Sarah sat across from James in the diner's break room, her hands racked around a cup of tea. The small room smelled of cleaning supplies and old coffee, with flickering fluorescent lights overhead. James looked out of place in his expensive suit, perched on a wobbly metal chair. 5 minutes, Sarah reminded him, checking the worn watch on her wrist. My kids need dinner, and I can't be late picking them up from my sister's house. James nodded, suddenly realizing how bizarre his proposition would sound. He'd spent the last 20 minutes rehearsing it in his head, but now, facing this tired but dignified woman, the words felt stuck in his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, I'll be direct. I'm aware of your situation. 7 children, another on the way, and struggling with bills since your husband's passing. He paused as her face hardened. I have a proposition that could solve your financial problems permanently. Sarah's eyes narrowed. And what exactly would that involve, Mr. Bennett? James Bennett. He pulled out his phone, showing her news articles about his company and wealth. I'm proposing marriage. The teacup clattered against the table as Sarah set it down too hard. Excuse me? A legal marriage, 1 year minimum. In exchange, I'll provide complete financial security for you and your children. Full medical coverage, education funds for all of them, a new house, whatever you need. James spoke quickly, aware of the time ticking away. You want for nothing. Sarah's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. This is crazy. You don't know me. I don't know you. I have 7 children and another on the way. 8 children who could have every opportunity in life, James countered. Think about it. The best schools, the best health care, no more double shifts or worrying about bills. Why? Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. Why would a millionaire want to marry a pregnant widow with 7 kids? What's the catch? James hesitated. He couldn't tell her about the bet. That would ruin everything. Let's just say I have my reasons. Business reasons. But I promise you, nothing illegal or improper. We'd have separate bedrooms, and I wouldn't interfere with how you raise your children. Sarah stood up, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor. My children aren't for sale, Mr. Bennett, and neither am I. Wait. James reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. These are my terms. Take them home, read them over. I'm offering $20 million in a trust for your children, a new house, and $5 million for you personally after 1 year of marriage. All I ask is that we live together and appear as a normal couple in public. Sarah's hand trembled as she took the document. $20 million for my children. In an irrevocable trust. Even if something happened to me, they'd be taken care of. James pulled out his business card. Have your lawyer look it over. I'll pay for the legal fees. Sarah stared at the paper, then back at James. I have conditions. This surprised him. Go on. My children come first. Always. You don't discipline them. You don't try to replace their father, and you don't make any decisions about their lives without my approval. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I keep working here, not because I need to, but because I want my kids to understand the value of hard work. And I want everything in writing, including what happens after the year is up. James nodded, impressed despite himself. Anything else? Yes. Sarah's eyes met his directly. You tell me the real reason. Not now, but sometime during this year. I want the truth. James felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration. This woman was smarter than he'd expected. Deal. Sarah folded the document and put it in her pocket. I'll have my sister's lawyer look this over. I'll give you my answer in 3 days. As she turned to leave, James called out, Why even consider it? Sarah paused at the door, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. Because last night, my oldest daughter offered to quit school and work full-time to help with bills. Because my 5-year-old needs braces we can't afford. Because my unborn baby deserves the medical care I can barely pay for. She took a deep breath. Sometimes, Mr. Bennett, being a good parent means making hard choices. She left James sitting alone in the break room, surrounded by the smell of industrial cleaner and old coffee, wondering if he was the one who had just made a deal with someone smarter than himself. 1 month into their marriage, James found himself in an unfamiliar situation, sitting at a large, chaotic dining table surrounded by children. The noise level was something he'd never experienced in his carefully controlled life. 7-year-old Tommy was arguing with 9-year-old Lucy about who had more mashed potatoes. 3-year-old twins Jack and Jake were giggling as they fed peas to each other. 12-year-old Michael was texting under the table, while 10-year-old Anna was telling everyone about her school play. But it was 15-year-old Emma who caught his attention. She sat directly across from him, watching his every move with suspicious eyes. Of all Sarah's children, Emma had been the hardest to win over. She was old enough to know something wasn't quite right about this sudden marriage. "Mr. Bennett," Emma said suddenly, making everyone at the table quiet down. She never called him James, despite her mother's encouragement. "Why exactly did you marry our mom?" Sarah, who was helping the twins with their food, looked up sharply. "Emma, we discussed this." "No, it's okay," James said, putting down his fork. For the first time in his life, he felt the need to justify himself to a teenager. "Your mother is a remarkable woman." Emma's eyes narrowed. "You didn't even know her a month ago. Now you live in our house." "Actually, we live in his house," Tommy interrupted, his mouth full of potatoes. "Don't talk with your mouth full," Sarah reminded him automatically. "The point is," Emma continued, "normal millionaires don't just marry waitresses with 7 kids and a baby on the way. They marry models or socialites." The table fell silent again. Even the twins stopped playing with their peas. James looked at Sarah, who was watching the exchange with concern. In the past month, he'd seen her strength as she managed this large family. He witnessed her wake up at dawn to make breakfast, help with homework, kiss scraped knees, and still maintain her dignity and grace. It had been educational. "You're right, Emma," James said finally. "Normal millionaires might not, but maybe that's why they're missing out on something special." "Like what?" Emma challenged. James gestured around the table. "Like this. In my world, people eat alone while checking their phones. They don't share stories about their day or argue about mashed potatoes. They don't have someone reminding them to chew with their mouth closed. So we're like your personal circus?" Emma's voice was sharp. "Emma." Sarah's tone held a warning. "No," James said quietly. "You're like a wake-up call. Do you know what I did last Saturday for the first time in 20 years? I played catch in the backyard. Your brother Michael taught me how to throw a proper pitch. Yesterday, Anna showed me how to make a paper crane. And this morning, the twins helped me pick out my tie. It's crooked," Jack announced proudly. "Very crooked," Jake agreed with a giggle. James smiled, touching the deliberately misaligned tie. "Yes, it is. And you know what? It's the best tie I've worn to any business meeting." Emma wasn't entirely convinced, but some of the hostility left her face. "You still haven't answered my question. Why, Mom?" James looked at Sarah, who was now listening intently while absent-mindedly rubbing her growing belly. A practiced answer about business arrangements died on his lips. "Because she was brave enough to take a chance on me," he said honestly. "And because she comes with this amazing family that's teaching me things I never knew I needed to learn." "Like what?" This time Emma's question held genuine curiosity. "Like how to be part of something bigger than myself. Like how the mess of spilled milk and crayon marks on walls and homework crisis can actually make a house feel more like home than perfect order ever did." The table was quiet again, but this time it was a thoughtful silence. Finally, Emma spoke. "Your tie really is crooked, and you have mashed potato on your $1,000 suit." James looked down at the stain he hadn't noticed. A month ago, it would have ruined his day. Now, he just laughed. "Well, I hear I have an excellent new fashion team," he said, winking at the twins. The tension broke. Tommy started another argument about dessert. Michael went back to his phone, and Anna launched into a detailed description of her costume for the play. But Emma kept watching James, and for the first time, he saw the smallest hint of a smile on her face. Later that night, as James lay in his bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house full of children, he realized something that shocked him. He'd completely forgotten about the bet. 3 months into their marriage, Sarah sat in Marcus Sterling's office, her hands trembling as she held a manila envelope. The expensive leather chair felt cold and unwelcoming, much like the man sitting across from her at his massive desk. "Mrs. Bennett," Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "thank you for coming. I thought you should see these documents." Inside the envelope were photos of James and Marcus at the Skyline Club, dated papers showing the details of their $5 million bet and bank transfer confirmations. Sarah's vision blurred as she read the terms. Marriage to Sarah Mitchell, widow with 7 children, currently pregnant. Duration, 1 year minimum. Why are you showing me this? Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Let's call it corporate responsibility, Marcus replied smoothly. Didn't you wonder why a billionaire would suddenly marry a waitress? Sarah stood up abruptly, gathering her things. The baby kicked inside her, as if sensing her distress. Without another word, she left the office, Marcus's satisfied smile burning in her memory. By the time James returned home that evening, the house was unusually quiet. No children running through the halls, no TV blaring cartoons, no homework questions being shouted across rooms. He found Sarah in the kitchen, surrounded by packed boxes. What's going on? He asked, loosening his tie. Where are the kids? At my sister's. Sarah's voice was calm, but her eyes were red from crying. We're leaving, James. Leaving? Why? What happened? Sarah slid the manila envelope across the kitchen counter. $5 million. That's what I'm worth to you. What my children are worth. James felt the blood drain from his face as he saw the contents. Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? Her calm facade cracked. How you made my family part of a bet. How you used my children's need for security to win some rich man's game. It wasn't like that, James started. Then what was it like? Sarah's voice rose. Because from where I'm standing, you saw a desperate widow with 7 kids and thought, perfect. She'll do anything for money. That's not fair, James protested. Things changed. I changed. Did you? Sarah laughed bitterly. When were you planning to tell me? After you won your bet? Or were you going to keep pretending to care about my children to maintain your perfect score? James reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Sarah, please. The bet might have been the reason I approached you, but it's not why I stayed. These past 3 months have been a lie. Sarah's hand rested protectively over her belly. Every moment, every conversation, every time you played with my children or helped with homework or pretended to care about our lives. I wasn't pretending. James ran his hands through his hair in frustration. Yes, it started as a stupid bet. I was drunk and arrogant and wrong, but your family changed me. Emma's suspicion made me want to be worthy of trust. Michael's love for baseball reminded me how to play. The twins' laughter taught me joy. And you? He took a shaky breath. You showed me what real strength looks like. Sarah stared at him, tears running down her face. How can I believe anything you say? Before James could answer, they heard cars pulling up outside. Sarah wiped her eyes. That's my sister and her husband. They're helping us move tonight. Tonight? No, wait. James stepped forward. Where will you go? What about the baby's medical care? The children's schools? We managed before you, Sarah said quietly. We'll manage again. Sarah, please. Give me a chance to make this right. She turned to him, her face showing more hurt than anger now. You know what's ironic? I was starting to fall in love with you. The man who played with my children, who brought soup when Tommy was sick, who held my hand at the last ultrasound. I thought he was real. The sound of car doors slamming outside made them both jump. Goodbye, James, Sarah said, picking up her purse. Congratulations on winning your bet. I hope it was worth it. James watched helplessly as Sarah's family arrived, efficiently loading boxes into waiting cars. The children didn't look at him as they passed, clearly having been told what happened. Only Emma paused in the doorway, giving him a look of such disappointment that it physically hurt. Within an hour, the house that had been full of life for 3 months was empty again. James stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the echoes of family dinners and children's laughter, realizing he'd lost something far more valuable than $5 million. James sat in his therapist's office, staring at the modern art on the walls. It had been 2 weeks since Sarah and the children left, and his perfectly ordered life felt emptier than ever before. So, you made a bet about marrying someone, Dr. Peterson said, reviewing her notes. But somewhere along the way, the bet stopped mattering. What changed? James thought about Tommy's missing front tooth smile, Anna's endless stories about school, and the twins' sticky-fingered hugs. Everything changed. I changed. Tell me about that, Dr. Peterson encouraged. I signed up for parenting classes last week, James said quietly. The other parents probably think I'm crazy, a billionaire sitting there learning about teenage communication and bedtime routines. But I need to understand. I need to be better. His phone buzzed. Another unanswered text from Marcus asking about the bet. James turned the phone off. After therapy, James drove to the local community center where he'd enrolled in Understanding Your Teen. The instructor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was discussing emotional intelligence when James's hand shot up. How do you rebuild trust with a teenager who has every reason not to trust you? The other parents turned to look at him, but James didn't care any more about his expensive suit or his recognizable face. He was just a man trying to learn how to be worthy of a family. That evening, James sat in his home office, surrounded by parenting books and child development research. His assistant entered with a confused look. Sir, the children's furniture you ordered has arrived. Should I have it sent to storage? No, James replied, not looking up from his book on supporting children through family transitions. Set it up in the rooms exactly as it was before. But sir, the family is gone. Just do it, please. James finally looked up. And contact the children's schools. I want to make sure their tuition is paid through the year, anonymously. Also, set up a meeting with my lawyers tomorrow. Later that night, James wrote 8 letters. 1 to each child and 1 to Sarah. He poured out everything he'd learned, everything he regretted, and everything he hoped to become. He wrote about Tommy's baseball games he'd missed, and Anna's upcoming school play he wouldn't see. He apologized to Michael for breaking their weekend fishing plans, and to the twins for missing their preschool graduation. To Emma, he wrote the hardest letter of all, acknowledging her instincts had been right about him, but hoping she'd see that people could change. To Sarah, he wrote about the transformation her family had sparked in him. He wrote about the parenting classes, the therapy sessions, and the endless books. He explained how her strength and dignity had shown him what real success looked like, not in money or power, but in the ability to love and nurture others. The next morning, James walked into his company's board meeting with a new proposal: comprehensive childcare facilities for all employees, flexible working hours for parents, and increased family leave benefits. This will cost millions, one board member protested. Then it's worth every penny, James replied firmly. He spent his weekends volunteering at local family centers, learning from other parents, understanding the challenges they faced. His public image transformed from the cold tech billionaire to someone genuinely invested in family welfare. 1 month after Sarah left, James received a call from Emma. His heart stopped when he saw her name on his phone. Mr. Bennett, he said, her voice careful. Mom doesn't know I'm calling. Is everything okay? He asked quickly. Do you need anything? Actually, Emma paused. I got your letter, and I've been watching the news. Those changes at your company, the family centers you're helping. I meant every word I wrote, Emma, James said softly. I'm trying to become someone worthy of being in your lives, even if you never give me another chance. There was a long silence. Finally, Emma spoke again. Mom's having trouble with the insurance for her prenatal care. She's too proud to use the money you left. I'll take care of it anonymously, James promised. How is she? How's the baby? They're fine. Emma hesitated. You're really different now, aren't you? I'm trying to be, James answered honestly. Every day. I have to go, Emma said quickly, but thanks for the letter. After she hung up, James sat in his office, looking at the family photo he still kept on his desk. It was from their last dinner together, everyone smiling, even Emma. He touched the frame gently, then turned back to his parenting books. He had more learning to do. It was 2 a.m. when James's phone rang. He'd been working late in his office, reviewing proposals for a new family-friendly corporate initiative. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Mom's in labor. Emma's voice was tense. Something's wrong. They're taking her to Metropolitan Hospital, but they don't have the specialist she needs. The insurance. I'm on it, James said, already grabbing his keys. I'll meet you there. Within minutes, James had his team arranging for the top maternal specialists in the city. By the time he reached the hospital, Sarah was being transferred to a private wing with the best medical care available. He found the children in the waiting room. Tommy was asleep across 2 chairs, while the twins were curled up in their aunt's lap. Michael paced nervously, and Anna was quietly crying. Emma stood by the window, her arms crossed. Is everyone okay? James asked softly, not wanting to wake the sleeping ones. Mom's scared, Emma said, turning to face him. The lady's coming too early. James nodded, his throat tight. The best doctors in the city are with her now. I've made sure. We didn't call you for money, Emma interrupted. I know, James said quietly, but I'm here anyway, for all of you. Hours passed. James made sure everyone had blankets, food, and anything else they needed. He answered the twins' sleepy questions about their mom, helped Michael with his homework to distract him, and listened to Anna's worried rambling about her baby sister or brother. Around dawn, Sarah's sister Janet pulled James aside. Sarah's asking for you, she said, her expression unreadable. James found Sarah in the delivery room, looking exhausted and scared. Machines beeped around her, and doctors spoke in hushed, urgent tones. James, she whispered when she saw him, the baby. It's going to be fine, he said firmly, taking her hand. You're both going to be fine. I didn't want to need you, Sarah admitted, squeezing his hand as another contraction hit. I know, but I'm here anyway. For the next 2 hours, James didn't leave her side. He held her hand through contractions, wiped her forehead, and reminded her to breathe. When the doctors looked concerned about the baby's heart rate, he saw the fear in Sarah's eyes and started telling her stories about the children to distract her. Remember when Tommy tried to teach me baseball? He said as she pushed. I'd never been so embarrassed in my life. A grown man who couldn't catch a ball. Sarah managed a weak laugh between pushes. The twins tried to help. Yes, they did. Threw about 20 balls at me at once. I had bruises for weeks. Finally, at 8:47 a.m., a tiny cry filled the room. It's a girl, the doctor announced, but we need to get her to the NICU immediately. Go with her, Sarah told James, her voice hoarse. Don't let her be alone. James followed the medical team to the NICU, watching as they worked on his tiny stepdaughter. She was so small, but her cry was mighty. Just like her mother, he thought. Hours later, James gathered all 7 children outside the NICU window. The baby, now stable, lay in her incubator, surrounded by tubes and monitors but fighting strong. She looks like Mom, Anna whispered. She's so tiny, Tommy said, pressing his nose against the glass. What's her name? The twins asked in unison. Your mom wants to call her Grace, James told them. Emma stood slightly apart from the others, watching James instead of the baby. Why did you come? She asked quietly. James looked at the tiny baby, then at each of the children he'd grown to love. Because you're my family, he said simply. Bet or no bet, marriage or no marriage, you're my family. I know I have no right to claim that, but it's true. Mom's been crying, Emma said. Not just because of the baby, she misses you. I miss her too, miss all of you. Emma was quiet for a moment. The parenting books in your office. I saw them when I came to get Mom's medical files. You've been reading about premature babies? James nodded. And teenage psychology, childhood development, twin dynamics, everything I could find. I needed to understand to be better. For the bet? For you. All of you. James turned to face her fully. The vet ended the moment your mother left. This, being here, learning, trying to help. This is just me, trying to be worthy of being in your lives. Emma looked at baby Grace, then back at James. For the first time in months, she gave him a real smile. Well, she said, Grace is going to need her dad. The word dad hung in the air between them like a precious, fragile gift. James felt tears in his eyes as he looked at his newest daughter through the window, surrounded by the children who would taught him what family really meant. 1 year had passed since that drunken night at the Skyline Club. James stood in his home office, looking at 2 envelopes on his desk. One contained a check for $5 million, his winnings from the bet. The other held divorce papers, giving Sarah complete freedom and financial security if she wanted it. Today was their first wedding anniversary, and James had asked Sarah to meet him at the house. After baby Grace's birth, they had slowly rebuilt a cautious friendship. James had proven himself during Grace's 3-week stay in the NICU, showing up every day, learning every medical term, and supporting the entire family. The doorbell rang. James found Sarah standing there, looking beautiful in a simple blue dress. Baby Grace slept peacefully in her carrier. The other kids? James asked, taking the carrier from her. With Janet. Grace wouldn't stop crying until I brought her along. Sarah smiled softly. She misses this house. Misses you. They settled in the living room, where so many family moments had happened. Grace slept on, making tiny sounds in her dreams. Sarah, James began, his heart pounding, I need to tell you everything. No more secrets. He told her about the night at the club, the drunken bet with Marcus, how he'd seen her as nothing more than a means to win. His voice shook as he described his initial coldness, his calculated approach. But then something happened, he continued. Something I never expected. Your children. They broke through every wall I built. Emma's fierce protection of her siblings, Michael's quiet strength, Anna's endless creativity, Tommy's determination, the twins' pure joy. And you. Sarah listened silently, her eyes on Grace. You showed me what real love looks like, James said. Not the superficial kind I knew, but the kind that gets up at 3 a.m. for a sick child. The kind that works double shifts to buy school supplies. The kind that puts everyone else first. He reached for the envelopes on the coffee table. This is the bet money. $5 million. And these are divorce papers. You can have both. Plus everything I promised. The trust funds, the house. Everything stays with you and the kids. Sarah looked at the envelopes but didn't take them. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve the truth. Because I love you. All of you, and love shouldn't be built on lies. James ran a hand through his hair. This past year taught me that real wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in Tommy's baseball games and Anna's school plays. It's in Michael's quiet conversations and the twins' chaos. It's in Emma's grudging acceptance and Grace's first smile. Baby Grace stirred in her sleep, and both parents instinctively reached to comfort her. Their hands touched over her tiny form. The vet ended months ago, Sarah said quietly. Why did you keep trying? The parenting classes, the therapy, all the changes at your company? Because I wanted to be better. Not for the bet, not for show, but because your family showed me what I was missing in life. James took a deep breath. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I needed you to know that while our marriage started as a lie, my love for you and the children is the most honest thing in my life. Sarah picked up the envelopes, turning them over in her hands. Do you know what Emma told me last week? James shook his head. She said you've changed, that she sees it in how you look at Grace, how you still show up for everyone's events even though we're apart, how you never stop trying. Sarah's voice softened. She said maybe people deserve second chances when they work hard enough for them. Emma said that? James asked, surprised. The same girl who once accused you of using us as your personal circus. Sarah smiled slightly. She also said Grace needs her dad. James felt his heart skip. And what do you think? Sarah stood up, walked to the fireplace, and did something that made James's breath catch. She dropped both envelopes into the flames. I think, she said, watching them burn, that love built on truth is stronger than love built on lies. And I think we wasted enough time living apart when we could be building something real. Grace chose that moment to wake up, reaching her tiny hands toward James. As he lifted her, Sarah moved closer, fitting perfectly against his side like she'd never left. No more bets, she whispered. No more bets, James agreed, holding his daughter in one arm and his wife in the other. Just family. In the fireplace, the last pieces of paper curled and turned to ash, taking the final remnants of their false start with them. On a bright spring morning, the garden of the Bennett house was transformed into a fairy tale setting. White chairs lined the lawn, flowers bloomed everywhere, and 8 children buzzed with excitement in their formal wear. 6 months had passed since Sarah burned those envelopes, and today they were renewing their vows, this time with their hearts truly invested. Emma, now 16, helped baby Grace toddle down the aisle in her tiny flower girl dress, while the other children took their places in the ceremony. James stood at the altar, remembering how different things had been at their first wedding. Back then, he'd been counting dollars. Now he counted blessings. Dad, Tommy called out, running up in his little suit. Michael can't find his tie. James smiled at the word Dad. It still felt like a gift every time he heard it. Let's go help him. In the house, Michael was panicking. Mom's going to be here any minute, and I look terrible. Here, James said, pulling off his own tie. Take mine. I got a spare upstairs. Michael looked surprised. But this is your lucky tie. No. James corrected him, helping him put it on. My luck is having you kids. The tie is just a tie. Downstairs, the twins were spinning in their matching suits, making themselves dizzy. Anna was practicing her reading for the ceremony, while Emma helped Grace take a few wobbly steps in her new shoes. Sarah appeared in the doorway, beautiful in a simple white dress. Everything okay up here? Perfect, James answered, looking at their assembled children. Absolutely perfect. The ceremony was everything their first wedding wasn't. Tommy and Michael walked Sarah down the aisle together. Anna read a poem she'd written about family. The twins served as ring bearers, managing to only drop the rings twice. Even Grace contributed, chatting data at the perfect moment, making everyone laugh. But it was Emma who surprised them all. When it was time for the speeches, she stood up, unfolding a piece of paper. A year and a half ago, she began, I hated the idea of this man entering our lives. I was sure he had ulterior motives. She paused, looking at James. I was right. The guests shifted uncomfortably, but Emma continued with a smile. But I was also wrong, because sometimes people surprise you. Sometimes they change in ways you never expected. She turned to face James and Sarah. I watched this man learn to be a father. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. I watched him sit through school plays and baseball games, help with math homework, and master the art of twin wrangling. The guests chuckled, and the twins waved proudly. But most importantly, Emma said, her voice softening, I watched him fall in love with our family. Real love, the kind that shows up every day, that puts in the work, that never gives up even when things get hard. James felt tears in his eyes as Emma continued. Mom, she said, you taught us that family isn't about perfect moments. It's about perfect efforts. And Dad. She looked directly at James. You proved that sometimes the biggest victories come from losing a bet and winning a family instead. After the ceremony, as their guests enjoyed the reception, James found Sarah watching their children play on the lawn. Grace was attempting to chase the twins, while Tommy showed Michael a new baseball trick. Anna was teaching some younger cousins a dance, and Emma sat nearby, smiling at it all. Remember our first wedding? James asked, wrapping his arms around his wife. Sarah leaned back against him. You were so nervous. I thought it was because of the marriage. Actually, I was terrified of messing up your children's lives. James chuckled. I had no idea they'd end up fixing mine instead. Dad. Grace's voice carried across the lawn as she toddled toward them. Up. James scooped her up, and she immediately grabbed his tie, the same one the twins had picked out for him all those months ago. You know, Sarah said, watching their youngest play with the crooked tie, you never did win that bet properly. We didn't make it through that first year. James looked at his family, all 8 children, his beautiful wife, the home filled with love and chaos and joy. No, he agreed. I want something much better instead. As if on cue, all their children converged on them, creating a group hug that nearly knocked them over. Standing there, surrounded by the family he never knew he needed, James realized that some victories couldn't be measured in millions. The real victory was in the crooked tie he wore proudly, in the chaos of family dinners, in the late-night baby feedings and early morning school runs. It was in Emma calling him Dad, in the twins' sticky hugs, in Tommy's baseball games and Michael's quiet talks and Anna's endless stories. The real victory was love.